So Chapter 14 ends with a look at supplemental plans for retirement as well as annuities. So that's our topic today. So there are many different other opportunities available to employees to save for retirement. And those are under what we call supplemental plans. It basically reduces your salary. Oftentimes it is a tax deferred type of thing. So you don't pay taxes on what you put in to this retirement plan until you withdraw it when you're older, you're ready to retire. Okay. So there's a few different types of plans. Profit sharing plans are available. Again, it's where the employer sets up a means in which they share profits over and above a certain point with all the employees. So profit sharing plans are strictly set up and funded by the employer. You have nothing to do with it whatsoever as an employee of that type of a company. They do all of that themselves, and you get the risk in that regard. The idea behind a profit sharing plan is that you're motivated to keep the company profitable and successful because you're going to end up sharing in those profits and benefiting from that. There are some employers that have or set up thrift and savings programs, plans which you contribute to. So they're part of a defined contribution plan, and they match some or in some cases all of that. Again, everything is tax deferred. The purpose of it is to save for retirement. The ones that you're most commonly aware of, the 401k, of course, is the most popular one that's talked about. And this is done through an employer with a for-profit agency, for a for-profit company that they set up a retirement plan called a 401k. They will only make contributions when you do. Okay. Sometimes those contributions can be quite generous. Some match 100% of what you put in to a certain point. Some are a little less generous, but it is company by company in that regard. If you work for a nonprofit corporation, and there's a lot of them, the 403b is the equivalent of the 401k. So a 401k is for a for-profit corporation to set up. The 403b is for a nonprofit corporation to set up. So say you worked for, the American Red Cross or, a large nonprofit corporation. This would be a retirement plan they could set up as well. And there's a number of other what we call 457 plans that could be offered from your employer. Again, it can be in addition to a pension plan that they already offer you. And again, it's the same type of thing. It's just you have a choice where you can put money in there. You make a contribution. It reduces your salary, so it reduces your taxes on your salary right now. You can invest it in that fund, in that plan, in different funds that they have available. And when you take it out, when you're older, that's when you'll be taxed on. You taxed on the withdrawals. And as you see, it's supplemental because you can pocket a lot of money in those types of things. And so for 2019, for example, employees can put away in any of these plans $19,000 a year. That's quite a lot. And if you're over 50, you can do another $6,000 on top of that. It's called a catch-up contribution because the government realizes that a lot of people are not ready to retire and they don't want everyone to be relying on Social Security. So they're trying to provide employees with tax benefits and incentives to save for their retirement. Okay. So 19 and 6 is $25,000 you can set aside. That's quite a lot of money each and every year. And if you start at 50 and you keep going, you can see that adds up quite a bit. There are a number of different Roth plans. The difference with the Roth plan and why it's its own separate type is because it doesn't reduce your taxes now. It's money that you put into the account is being put on your tax records this year and taxed. The difference is when you take it out when you retire, it's tax-free. There's no taxes on what you pull out of the account because you've already paid the tax when you put the money in. So in all of these plans, you're only taxed once. It's just a matter of whether you want to get taxed up front, which is what the Roth plan gives you. So later on, you take the money out, there's no tax. Or with all the other plans, they are tax deferred, which means there's no tax now. But when you take the money out later, you have to put that on your tax return and pay the tax then. So again, it works the same way. It's still a retirement related type of savings account that you can invest. For folks that are self-employed, or for those that have small businesses with very few employees, their retirement accounts can be either a self-employment plan, which is a SEP, or they can set up a KEO account. And these can be shared. This is overwhelmingly benefits the owner, that's for sure. But you can set up additional accounts for employees under these plans. And again, you can contribute a lot of money here. Okay? 25% of your earned income or $56,000 a year. I mean, that's a ton of money. Okay. The only thing is you have to wait to withdraw it, right? Like all these other plans, they're meant for retirement. And so if you withdraw the money out of the account too early, which for almost all the plans is you're not yet 59 and a half years old. I thought they stopped counting halves when you were like, what, 5? I'm 5 and I'm 4 and a half. I'm 3 and a half. But apparently when you're 59 and a half, you can brag about that as well. There's a tax penalty that applies to that. 10%. So it's a pretty hefty whack slap on the wrist for taking money out too early. Okay. And so again, overwhelmingly, all these plans have this one thing in common. They're usually invested in mutual funds, which is why the mutual fund component of our discussions and study earlier was so important. And for those folks who either work for an employer who does not provide any retirement savings or supplemental plans, or if you wish to have a more retirement savings, you can open up your own IRA. So an IRA is an individual retirement account. So it's a type of an account that's meant for retirement, and it is for you. Okay. And there are two basic types of IRAs that are listed here. The traditional IRA has been that you put money in now, and that money is not taxed now. So in essence, it lowers the amount of income tax you pay now. But when you take the money out, when you retire, you'll pay the tax then. The Roth is just the opposite. You pay the tax now, and then later on, when you take it out, you don't have to pay the tax then. Okay, so a lot of it depends on, well, what should I get? Should I open a traditional IRA? Should I open a Roth IRA? It really depends on the tax rate you're at right now versus the tax rate you're likely to be when you're retired. For the vast majority of people, it works out that they're in a much lower tax bracket when they retire. So it makes sense to do a traditional IRA because you save tax dollars now when your taxable income is higher. So you're in essence paying a higher tax rate now than you would in the future. If you're relatively well off, you make a very high salary, you're probably in the upper tax bracket and you're paying those very high rates now. And so, later on, would you still be in that particular situation? Well, it's sort of hard to know. But for folks that choose to do a Roth IRA, they are choosing to pay the tax now and take it out later. One of the benefits of taking it out later in a Roth is, of course, if your investments do well. And again, if you put all that money in a Roth IRA, say even in a stock index fund, right, to the S&P 500, you saw what happened to the index over that 80-year period on those charts. For every dollar you put in, 80 years later, you had over $3,000. So you can see that, you could have a lot more money later on. And so, you certainly don't want to pay those high rates then. It's better to pay it now on a little bit of money than then on a lot of money. And so for folks that tend to have that orientation, a Roth makes perfect sense. But again, for most people, the traditional is the safe bet in essence. There's a limit on how much you can contribute to either of these IRAs. It's $6,000, but there is an additional $1,000 contribution, so it's up to $7,000 if you're over 50. Again, the government is trying to encourage older people to save for retirement, so they don't basically end up living off Social Security only. Okay. So that's that. There is an additional type, a different type of IRA called a Coverdale. It's considered an IRA because it is a long-term account, but it's mostly used for educational purposes, so tuition, books, fees, etc. And so it works like an IRA, but it's specific for educational expenses specifically. Okay, and so that's how that works. It's not for retirement, although it's considered like an IRA. Okay. The last thing here that your book talks about is a lot of people consider annuities in retirement because again, they have, if they've been very lucky and they have a large amount of money in their IRA or in their 401k plan or 403b, they want to make sure that that's going to last a long time. So they could do what we did way back in chapter 1, which is do those present value tables and figure out how much of a payment each year could be made from a large amount of money. Or what some people do is they buy this product from an insurance company called an annuity. An annuity, basically the insurance company guarantees a certain series of payments over time. Sometimes that could be over a lifetime. Sometimes that's a guaranteed period of 5 years or 10 years or something like this. But basically, it's an investment product that you're buying from an insurance company. That's what an annuity is. The purpose of it is they manage everything. They pay out what you need, okay, on a regular basis every month or however you want to set it up. They will pay you a regular payment for a certain time period that you all agree to when you buy the annuity. Okay. There are costs to an annuities because it's a product sold by an insurance company, so they're going to take a fee to sell you this particular product. They can also be survivor benefits to this particular product, which might not, well, which might end up being more than if you just left a lump sum to them. So again, that's what an annuity is. And again, your book just sort of goes over various classifications of annuities that I think if you're looking into one is extremely important. But if you are, if you're not, then some of these things are not going to matter all that much. But basically, it sort of breaks down how you're paying for it up front, single, or you're doing installments. When do you want the payment out? You want an immediate payout, or you're going to wait until a certain date and then start paying out? And then, how are these proceeds going to be disposed of in the form of your, how many years, a certain period? Is it going to be a refund? Is it going to be a life insurance benefit? Whatever. And certain, definitions of an annuity benefit that's part of a contract. Okay. So nothing huge on that. You just have to know what it is. You don't have to really kind of dive very deeply into the details there. Let me take you now to the web to show you a couple of pieces of information there that might be useful to you. That I hope is useful to you. So first of all, just a quick check. Can you see a web page in front of you? Okay. So how are people doing with their IRAs, individual retirement accounts? Well, not that good. It seems like a lot of money, $115,000. That was the average balance in an IRA account in 2019. And then, of course, the first part of 2020, we had that big pullback by the stock market, so it dropped. But it's since recovered because we're at still at kind of high levels here. But that's $115,000 is supposed to last for the rest of the person's life, right? So clearly, it's not working out all that well. Our wonderful 401k system is not working out that well either. If you look at what the average and median balances of 401ks are for folks based on their age, you see the folks that are ready for retirement in general, right? Those that are 65 and older. The average balance is only 193,000, but that's the average. Averages can be, skewed by large numbers. Better to look at the median, that middle number. So the middle number is 58,000. That's just terrible because that's supposed to last, in many cases, 20 years. So by age group, as you see, the older folks are getting, the more they are saving in their 401ks, and so the balances are increasing. But it really just can't be emphasized enough to just start as early as possible. One of the big issues with 401k programs is people's income. When you have an annual income that's very, very low, you can see that their average 401k balance is also very, very low. Worse yet, the median 401k balance is ridiculously low. Okay, this might only last 1 month in retirement, never mind 20 years. So certainly folks that have lower income levels have needs between rent and food and healthcare and so forth that just absorb almost all of their income, and so they don't have very much to save, and they don't have a lot of incentive to save because they need that money now for some things that are necessary. So the balances are very, very low. But if you go up, this is the income scale on the far left. Look at the folks that are in the six-figure income and above, very high incomes. They do have very high average balances. Even their median balances are relatively much higher. Of course, nothing to brag about because, again, this is not going to get you very far if you're looking to retire in 20 years. It's just not going to help you all that much. It might help you for a few years, but it's not going to help you for 20 years. And then, of course, one of the problems we do have in society is a problem of equity. This doesn't have a breakdown by race. I'm sure we would see large inequalities there as well, but certainly it does by gender. And you see here between their average 401k balances and their median 401k balances, men have a distinctive advantage, and that's reflected in higher paying jobs, better opportunities for some cases for men than women. And so basically that's part of it. Well, of course, women have more needs because women tend to live a lot longer than men, at least 2 to 4 years longer than men. And so it's going to be hard to grab not just 20 years, but add another 4 years to that. It's not a lot of money to last. So you're looking at, sizable problems down the road. Okay. And I've taken you to Fidelity just to sort of understand we're not actually going to be, I can't actually open an account because I'm going to need all types of personal information. But I did want to show you their page for retirement and IRAs. And it shows you what I was talking about the other day as well. I'll mention again. So a traditional IRA is one in which you pay your taxes later. So you want to reduce your income tax now, your taxable income now, but you'll pay your taxes when you make withdrawals later on. That's a traditional IRA, and anyone with any earned income can open an IRA. Okay. And I'm at the Fidelity site, but you can go to any financial institution site to open an IRA. Some people want tax-free withdrawals when they get older. So they want to pay their tax now and take the money out later without taxes. Well, that's what a Roth IRA will do. Again, you're sort of assuming you'll have a lot more money back in the future, and thus it'll be better for you to pay the tax now on, say, $6,000 than taxes later on $60,000. So that's the thing there. But again, as you see from the charts that I showed you before, it tends to be the higher income groups that really take advantage of this because it is for them. This is one of those things that's specific for wealthier individuals to take advantage of. And as I was talking with Adam the other day about the fact that he had a 401k with his old employer, and he had a few choices. He could leave his 401k at his old employer, which is one choice. But if you wanted to take control over that yourself, then that's what a rollover IRA is. Okay. So any former employer where you had a 401k or a 403b, a rollover account allows you to take it away from your account, away from the employer, and put it into a rollover IRA that you control. Okay. Now the control is really irrelevant in the sense that it's a fiduciary responsibility. It's not like they can grab your money in your account. They can't. The control is some people want to continue to contribute to it, which you can. There are income limits, but you can for most people. And it does allow for that type of flexibility. So I have a rollover at Fidelity myself, and I've only contributed a little bit to it since, but it is an option for folks who would like to do more in that regard. But this is basically how it's an application. You make a deposit, you pick out your investments, and you're good. You can also set up a systematic payment. So every month or so, or every paycheck, a certain amount comes out of your check and gets put into that account, or you can link it to your checking account and have them withdraw, say, well, what did we talk about last time? Can you spare $20 a week, 25, $30 a week? You saw how that grew over time. So that could be set up through one of these accounts as well for you. So that's the tour. Any questions?